Welcome to Best Ball Study Hall. I'm your host, Jeremiah Retzlaff. You can find me on X at Coach Retzlaff1. First, I just want to give a shout out to all the fathers. Happy Father's Day weekend to you. For me, I have two sons, a 4-year-old and a 6-month-old. It's been the biggest blessing for me in my life. And it's just so funny. Last night, I'm watching the Yankees and Red Sox. I'm a big Yankees fan. And if you would have told me 20 years ago, I'd be sharing my high school self. If you would have said, hey, Jeremiah, you're going to be sharing some of your Yankees Red Sox TV time with a show called Paw Patrol, I would have been like, what are you talking about? It's just so neat how it changes. And we watched a little bit of that show. And of course, I got to go watch the Yankees win the rest of the night. So it's been really fun. Being a father is one of the best things you can do if you have that opportunity. And also for 4 o'clock games, it's funny, the nap schedule for my son, it's been 1 to 4, 12 to 3. I've always been able to watch those 1 o'clock games, but come 4 o'clock games, I'm maneuvering around on my phone, on some iPad, moving a laptop around where I can. So it really does change priorities and things for you. So shout out to all the dads out there. Let's get into some Best Ball Study Hall. I have a team right now. I titled it McBride and Pickens. Let's see what I have coming up. Here I am at the 3-4 turn. So it's pick 36 and 37. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Drake London, how I started off. 12-13, double tap. Marvin Harrison Jr., Drake London, we've talked about just different clicks that you can get. If you're at the 11 wraparound pick to 14 or the 12-13 pick, you're trying to do a lot of differentiated things at the turn, but sometimes you just have to gargle out what is there on the board. And I love me some Marvin Harrison Jr. I love some Drake London. I was looking at pre-NFL draft exposure. Drake London, for me, I remember picking him in the 40s. He was going much later, so it's been cool to see the surge. But if you've been drafting all this time, you've been able to benefit and see the climb up. So if you're early on some players, you can see some ADP trends before they happen. And sometimes in fantasy football, if you're not early, you're late. In the instance of Drake London, if you were early on him, you're not late now. But ADP has climbed up to the 12-13 turn here for Drake London. And Drake London is going right now 14 ADP on Underdog. So what I have in my queue, I titled to myself, I have a double tap here. I have Trey McBride and George Pickens. I'm going to go with some George Pickens to add to the squad and also some Trey McBride. So my thought, belief, and feeling here is as I go through ADB down the board, I am going to want Kyler Murray on this team. I like Harrison with McBride with Kyler Murray. So of course I'm going to look at that angle. If I can't get Kyler Murray, I can think about some Rams exposure later on. Matthew Stafford is a player who there's very little pressure to go and get another quarterback in place of Kyler. If I miss Kyler, there's very little pressure. There's very few people who are competing for Matthew Stafford later in the draft. So I'll be happy to build towards some Cardinals and some Rams. And as a secondary build, maybe I can look towards George Pickens with some Chiefs players. And of course, Justin Fields is a player that I am bullish on later. Let's go to another draft. Let's see, I have labeled Pickens or McLaurin. Here I have, it is Jalen Hurts at quarterback. CeeDee Lamb and Devonta Smith are my receivers. So I have that Philly-Dallas correlation going on early on. What I also have, though, is the decision in my queue. I have Terry McLaurin, George Pickens, Jaden Reed, Hollywood Brown, and Keenan Allen. I'm at the wraparound turn. So I'm in the 4th round at the 4-11, and then I'll have the 5-2. So the way I want to lead directionally, I see George Pickens is at the top at 42. I did just click him in that first draft, and then I have Terry McLaurin down here at 50. My belief and feeling is how hot of a name George Pickens has been. George Pickens will go to the person right in between me who has 3 running backs. I'm A-okay with letting George Pickens go because of the fact that I just clicked him in a prior draft and I have exposure elsewhere. And what I'm trying to do with quarterback being Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith, the Washington Commanders play Philadelphia week 16. And then week 17, it's Philly versus Dallas. So if I click and lock in here to some Terry McLaurin, That's going to squad set up very nicely for some NFC East correlation. And the beauty is, I love me some Jaden Daniels. If you listen to different pods that I've been on or been in Discords with me on Destination Debbie, know that I love me some Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels stacks. The price for Jaden Daniels is going to go way up into next year, but the beauty is you can get Jaden Daniels much later. So now as I click, this person in between me most likely will take George Pickens. They're going to have a huge need at wide receiver. So I could see them possibly taking Hollywood Brown, the combination of Pickens, Brown, maybe Keenan Allen, Jaden Reed. So I've queued up 4 receivers to come away at pick 50 after the double tap in between me. So I'm going to come out with one of George Pickens, Jaden Reed, Hollywood Brown, or Keenan Allen. So my squad set up right now, I've got 1 quarterback in Hurts, no running backs, no tight ends. My 3 receivers are CeeDee Lamb, Devonta Smith, and Terry McLaurin. And then I'm happy on the other side, whatever this person between me gives me, I will take. And then in that instance, it is the list of George Pickens, Jaden Reed, Hollywood Brown, and Keenan Allen. I'll be very psyched to get any of them. Next up, this is a Pug, but super flex. The Pug, but super flex is a 3 max entry, $12. Very cool, neat wrinkle that the best ball community, that Underdog has for us, just offering different contests. If you can't do every single Best Ball Mania 150 drafts, everybody's got a budget, right? The beauty is 3 by 12, that's $36. You're getting 3 drafts there. Let's say you have a $100 budget, you're getting 20 drafts there, and you can portfolio out to a 20 max entry contest as well. So there's just different things that you can think about what's offered from Underdog and what you have for your budget. So when you see people's numbers out there, just understand they're taking stances possibly financially that are higher than you, maybe where you're at, or where they're lower than you financially as how much they're outputting. But what you want to follow is people's patterns for the percentage of players that they're drafting. Granted, the more volume you have, the better your read and insight you can get into how somebody is drafting. So here we have this super flex. I have Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, and CeeDee Lamb. I have no running backs. I have no tight ends. I've spoken to before how running back and receiver, since it's 2 receiver spots, 2 running back spots, it's more even in the importance. So you don't have to go hard at the wide receiver position. But I titled this draft, Go BPA. All right, best player available. In this instance, at the top of my queue, I have Brandon Ayuk, Chris Olave, Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Sam Laporta, on down to Deshaun Watson. I don't feel so pressed since I have Jordan Love and Justin Herbert. The beauty is Love and Herbert, I can end up with a lot of their weapons down the ADP board because there's values with the Chargers and there's actually values with the Green Bay Packers. Of course, Jaden Reed is going to be the highest priced Packer receiver, but then on down the line between Watson, Doubs, and as he's been as a named Dontavian Wicks is still extremely affordable, especially in these super streets. So my team, just simple starting off, Jordan Love, Herbert. I feel no pressure at quarterback. I love having CeeDee Lamb as my number 9 pick. I didn't go with a quarterback in the first round. I just said, hey, let me take BPA, and that being best player available, CeeDee Lamb. I went with CeeDee Lamb, and now I'm just going to click Brandon Ayuk. And sometimes if you make sure that you click players that aren't necessarily stacked, but they're best player available, it just takes care of your roster construction for you later on in the draft. And of course, it alleviates pressure. If I'm reaching too far for my stacks, then I'm really jumbling up my team's roster construction. And that's just not something you want to do. I have a Hound Dog, and it says I made a note to myself to go with Justin Fields. So here I have a 2-5-7-2 build. Here are my quarterbacks: Patrick Mahomes, Will Levis. I'm very bullish on Will Levis this year, and I like the Titans offense. They're just going to throw an insane amount, and I almost feel like they're going to just go through their down spurts by throwing. They're going to try and get out of any kind of a slump by continuing to throw. So even when Will Levis is inefficient, just based on the volume of passing that the Titans have, they're just going to be an offense that you're going to want. And it's counterintuitive and not what we're used to, because if you can recall, the Titans with Derrick Henry and Mike Vrabel, they run like crazy. So I think it's just going to be flipped on its head there. So I have quarterback Mahomes and Levis. Let me read off my tight ends. I have Brock Bowers and Pat Freiermuth. I don't feel pressure to go with a tight end. We're in round 17 here, so I have 2 picks left. So I have 2 quarterbacks, 2 tight ends. My running backs, Bijan Robinson, Jalen Warren, Gus Edwards, Jerome Ford, Chuba Hubbard. So in that running back room, Jalen Warren I have correlating with Patrick Mahomes in that Week 17 matchup. Gus Edwards just got some bearish injury news. We'll see the extent to his injury, but hey, he's on my team. I don't have a lot of Gus Edwards, but I have been trying to be mindful to get some more clicks. I would love Kamani Vidal to take off. I have bags packed pre-NFL draft, post-NFL draft for Vidal, but we'll just monitor to see how things go with Edwards. Right now, I'm not high or low on this Edwards news. And then, of course, Jerome Ford. I made a different click. We got to love somebody out of that backfield in Cleveland. I've been out on Nick Chubb, so why don't I sprinkle in some Jerome Ford? Chuba Hubbard, though, I am very high on him and Jonathan Brooks. My angle has been to click both, and usually I do them so separately. I am now waiting right now. I've been out since the Jonathan Brooks news came out from Dave Canales about maybe having to start training camp off a little slower, onboarding a little bit slower for Jonathan Brooks. I've been out on Jonathan Brooks to see where the dip is on Jonathan Brooks. I'm still clicking some Chuba Hubbard, and then I'm anticipating there'll be a little bit of a dip on Jonathan Brooks. If there is, I am just going to keep clicking. So it's a pause on my Jonathan Brooks exposure, and then I'm going to continue adding Chuba Hubbard. I believe the numbers, without looking, it's like 25% exposure for Brooks, and then I've got about 20% exposure for Hubbard. So I have them near neck and neck, but of course there's different ADP points to the drafts where I have them. And I've been drafting Brooks and Hubbard separately. So I go through the rest of the team for the receiver position. Remember, I have Mahomes and Levis as my quarterbacks. I have Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf. There's George Pickens on the opposite side of Patrick Mahomes for that Week 17 correlation. DeAndre Hopkins, you'll love to see it with Will Levis. I love clicking DeAndre Hopkins. He can be your 4th, your 5th wide receiver. Why not? And there, in this draft, Hopkins is my 4th receiver. My 5th receiver, another guy who, if you can get as your 5th receiver, Rashee Rice. He's there with Patrick Mahomes. Love clicking on some Rice. There's Roman Wilson on the other side. So I've got some excellent exposure to this Chiefs and Steelers game. Luke McCaffrey, I really like having him here as my 7th wide receiver. Luke McCaffrey could actually just end up being that perfect late round wide receiver that you want in that change Commanders offense with Jaden Daniels. I'm bullish on the Commanders offense, and we've seen rookies before. I'm not going to put too much hype on Luke McCaffrey, but rookies can come in and do well. And of course, he's got that McCaffrey name to live up to, so you love to see it there. The only guy I have right now in my queue, granted I have 2 rounds left, I am just going to go and take Justin Fields. Justin Fields is a 207 ADP. I don't feel like Fields will come back to me when I'm there at pick 211. And I know sometimes there's strategy and you don't want to have both quarterbacks on both sides from one game for Week 17. But I really love in this instance to challenge myself to do something different. I'm going to click on Justin Fields. So now I have huge representation to this Chiefs and Steelers game. My 3 quarterbacks, Mahomes, Levis, Fields. Running backs, Warren goes with Fields. Gus Edwards, Jerome Ford, Chuba Hubbard. My receivers, Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf. Now here's George Pickens with Fields. D-Hop with Will Levis. Rashee Rice with Patrick Mahomes. Roman Wilson, I don't love Roman Wilson on an island, but I like him correlated, attached to those Chiefs. And then I like Roman Wilson even more correlated with Justin Fields. I'm making the bet on Justin Fields versus Russell Wilson. So that's a factor in here on this build as well. And of course, I spoke to how much I like Luke McCaffrey. Pat Freiermuth is there correlated with Justin Fields, and of course Patrick Mahomes. And then I love me some Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers at 102. Sign me up. You can get Brock Bowers sometimes in the hundreds, but he is creeping into the 90s. People love them some Brock Bowers. And especially when you've got such a good team set up, Brock Bowers just being there. I know Elite Tight End Discourse has been the conversation on X. Brock Bowers is just one of those guys who you feel real, real good when you have a baseline of your team set up. So let's see. Let's do at least one more draft. See what I have labeled here. I have Kamara or Ingram. I made a note to myself. Here I have, it's a 1-2-3-0 build. I have CJ Stroud. My running backs are Bijan Robinson and Jonathan Taylor. So I went hard, double tapped. Well, not double tap because they're not next to each other, but 7-18 for my 2-1-2 picks. I went Bijan and Taylor, RB. So I've gone heavy running back here. I have Stephon Diggs to go directly with CJ Stroud. Christian Kirk is my wide receiver 2, and Hollywood Brown, my receiver 3. I have no tight end at the moment. Then I have Alvin Kamara, who's right at the top of the queue. I like clicking him. He fell something like 12 or 13 spots to me yesterday in a draft where I had Jonathan Taylor as my RB1. And maybe this contract news could be the source of some of that dip. And I asked on X, is this going to be more of a trend or did I just get lucky? So that remains to be seen. But right now at the very top of the ADP board, Alvin Kamara is there. But I love me some Evan Ingram here. And with my build, if I only had one running back or I had no running backs in this instance, I would have another receiver. I may have a tight end, an elite tight end that we spoke to. And maybe I have another quarterback, but most likely not. I would go Alvin Kamara. But since I have Bijan and Taylor and going 3-3 this early, even at running back and receiver, remember this now is a single quarterback contest. It's not super flex where you got to fill 2 receiver, 2 running back. We're back here to 3 receivers, 2 running backs that we're filling out. And of course, a flex spot between Alvin Kamara and Evan Ingram. I'm going to go towards Evan Ingram. So here I click Evan Ingram, and to review my team and another just like last little selling pitch point to Evan Ingram is the fact that I have CJ Stroud with Stephon Diggs. I'm very happy at running back Bijan and Taylor, but now I can start building with Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. I can start looking towards Trevor Lawrence to build some Jaguars exposure. So that's part of my mindset. Another tiebreaker between Ingram and Kamara. It was both roster construction and the fact that I can set up another team stack. And I'm also still within that ADP point where I didn't reach on Ingram. Neither Ingram or Kamara would have been a reach. And then I'll do one more draft, the mini Schnauzer. And I had a note that's just telling me to go towards Isaiah Pacheco. Let's see what the board gives me. This is right. I have Lamar Jackson, my 3 receivers, Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, Zay Flowers. So I tried to go for, I try and call it the inside straight because you're trying to rip Zay Flowers, Lamar Jackson, and Mark Andrews. And it falls sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. So what happened to me here was Mark Andrews, I'm at pick 55. Mark Andrews went pick 52. So it happened. I'm not going to call it a snipe because that is the appropriate ADP for Mark Andrews. But the build, I've done it before where I've had 3 receivers to start. I've got Lamar and Andrews. Now, part of those 3 receivers can be Zay Flowers. So then you're getting Zay Flowers, Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews. So you're trying to get that little inside straight of those 3 Ravens, Lamar, Flowers, Andrews. It works sometimes, other times it doesn't. The more you click Flowers and Lamar, law of large numbers, you'll be able to get somebody in these drafts, these other drafters. Oh, I don't have Ravens exposure. I don't think I want Mark Andrews. So some people will think in that direction. Now, I also looked towards the board. Is there any Houston Texan out there? I do have Joe Mixon here, and I do have Isaiah Pacheco. So now as I'm looking at it, I really do like Isaiah Pacheco. He's an excellent value. But now I'm starting to think maybe I should go towards some of that Houston and Ravens build. And to differentiate, I need to get some of my Joe Mixon numbers up. I'm very tempted. I'm torn. I want Isaiah Pacheco because of where he's at right now. But then Joe Mixon, I think, correlates so well with my team build. I'm actually going to go on with Joe Mixon. And in a simulation, if I have this multiple times throughout a portfolio, I need to flip-flop back and forth between Isaiah Pacheco and Joe Mixon. But now the way this team is built, on your path, you draft through to get to, people take from you, and the board gives you something different. In this instance, I tried for the Lamar, Flowers, Mandrews stack. I got Lamar and Flowers, missed out on Mandrews. Opportunity presents itself in different ways and different ripples. Now I have Joe Mixon. So sometimes it's a blessing and a curse. In this instance, heading into Father's Day here, I'm going to look at this as a blessing, right? Mark Andrews got taken on me, but it put me on a path where I can get some of that Houston, Baltimore stack and correlation for week 17. So there's Lamar with Joe Mixon, my 3 receivers, Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, Zay Flowers. So I've got a good start to my draft. And of course, I have outs much later with Brock Purdy, and depending on who I want as the Minnesota quarterback, to pair with Justin Jefferson. So once again, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. I've been Jeremiah Retzlaff. This has been Best Ball Study Hall. I will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.